If I am not allowed to have access to all sides of me, all parts of me, all of my emotions, and be able to communicate that in a safe way, I am not being authentic. I am not tapping into myself. I don't have access to who I truly am. I continue to be this idea of who I should be, or who you told me I should be, or the role I have to play. And anytime that I'm playing a role, I'm separating myself from self. You and I have always just like dropped in and have been so comfortable just talking to one another. So I don't even feel like I have to get ready to talk to you. I just have to just talk to you and drink my coffee.
But that's what good conversation's about, right? Like even when we first got on, I was like, let me go grab a cup. Like, I just know we're going to sit down and jam it out. And this is like my happy part of the day. So it's never work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. It's so, it's a Gabor Mate that says that we heal in relationship. I think it's Gabor Mate who said that. It's either Gabor Mate or Dick Schwartz, but I think it's Gabor Mate. And it's so true. So part of healing in relationship is conversation. Yeah. Conversations about anything and everything. Conversations, communication, all of that, which is lacking in our childhood for the most part. Mm-hmm. We get to do it in adulthood, and we're healing. We don't even know it. We're just communicating and talking.
It's the entire reason why I created the podcast 3 years ago, because it was very evident to me, at least in the States, that there were a handful of phrases we heard all the time growing up. Don't burden that person with your problem. Don't air our dirty laundry. Keep it quiet. And really what it sent was a message of, this is not perfect. This is not, I'm putting in quotes, good. And so therefore we shouldn't share it with anyone. We should only share when things are good, which sends us the subliminal message of that when things are not good, they're wrong.
Exactly.
But if we're hardwired as human beings for connection, and when we need connection the most is when we're in struggle, and we're taught to disconnect and struggle, we then wonder why we have more addiction, more suicidality, more anxiety, more depression than we've ever had. But we were taught to disconnect when we needed that human connection.
Yeah, and right? It creates this culture of secrets and lies, right? And if shame. I start to and shame, but secrets and lies is that place where I don't have an identity. Mm-hmm. My identity is based on everything looks good. I'm going to tell you what's good, but I'm not going to tell you what's wrong. I'm not going to tell you how I feel. So I start to live in this secrets and lies. I'm a child. I grew up in this. I become an adult. I don't know who the fuck I am. I have no idea. I have no idea, because I have been being this person that I think you want me to be for me to be accepted or whatever it may be that I need to get from you. And it's this convoluted, toxic hamster wheel that I can't get off of.
And I work not only with women, but primarily with women. I think you just kind of attract your tribe, right? And I end up getting a lot of referrals from women to women. And very recently, I always find my clients come to me in clusters of types, like meaning like they're kind of all in struggle with the same thing around the same time, which is always very interesting for me because it's like a PhD in that thing in a very intense, situation. And I've had this string of clients that very, very, very clearly felt very misunderstood, unheard, unseen, insignificant as young daughters, right. And all found themselves subsequently in relationships that then fed that insecurity, that insignificance, that not enoughness. And each one, to your point, has said the same thing to me in the course of this last 2 months, which is, if I say, what is it that you would like in life? Because I'm doing, hypnosis with them in a very specific therapeutic model. They'll say to me, I don't know, because I don't even know who I am.
Exactly.
I don't know what I like.
Because nobody taught me. Nobody gave me the opportunity to express.
Taught, but there was a sensation in their system of fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being liked when they were young, that they just learned this kind of sideline of like, well, what do you want to do? Well, where do you want to go eat? Well, what movie do you want to see? And they started deprioritizing their needs for fear of, if I speak up and say what I really want to do, where I really want to go, they might not like me. And I've already been abandoned once, so I can't handle that. They didn't obviously consciously know that that was happening. So I have one gal I'm working with right now. She's going through a divorce, and she wants to create new traditions within her family.
Good.
She has children. And I said, well, what would you like to create? She goes, I don't know. I've never been allowed to, because she started that in childhood, but then she found herself in a relationship where she really, anytime she tried to insert her voice or say, I would think we should do this, or I would like to do this, it was no.
Yeah.
So she just got quiet, right?
Yeah. So I get the other side of that. I get the males who were taught to not be vulnerable, to have the answer, and to lead. So I get them to me because they've been doing this all their life. They're exhausted, and they've never had anybody on their side. They've never had a place where they can go and just drop in and let it all out. So it's years of unpacking of this idea of who I have to be. I can't be vulnerable because vulnerability is weakness. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a brother. I have to know the answers. I have to lead. I have to take charge, right? Like you said, like, where are we going to go have dinner? Well, I have to know where to go. I have to know what to say. I have to be the breadwinner. I have to be the alpha. Meanwhile, that may be sort of like the place to be for some men, but not for all, not for most,
Well, and I think it's going to hinder the relationship.
100%. Well, because you're not authentically you. If I am not allowed to have access to all sides of me, all parts of me, all of my emotions, and be able to communicate that in a safe way, I am not being authentic. I am not tapping into myself. I don't have access to who I truly am. I continue to be this idea of who I should be, or who you told me I should be, or the role I have to play. And anytime that I'm playing a role, I'm separating myself from self.
And one of the things that you and I are both, very well versed in is parts work.
Yeah.
It's known as internal family systems, polyvagal theory, all of these different therapeutic models that all kind of center around this idea of we're all born with a sense of self, a core essence, a soul, a source energy, a self energy that's very calm and connected and curious and creative and all of these amazing things. But we start to get shadowed out by these other kind of parts of us that show up very young based on observing our environment. How do I need to shift a little bit to feel seen and heard and understood? What's so frustrating and what I've been trying to work with people on is if someone's in a relationship and they're not working. So let's use that client, for example. She's going through a divorce. This did not work out. She's showing up as X. He's showing up as Y. And what I try explaining to her, well, if you've been driven by this part of perfection and good girl and people pleaser and lack of boundary setter, do you think that you're interfacing with his self?
Right.
What part of him has really taken the primary role? So now you're not really meeting itself at all.
Now we're in trauma bonding.
Right. Now we're just, and I think maybe we should talk about that.
No, but what I want to talk about is my theory that I have to tell you this because everybody needs to know. So here's what I believe, and this explains IFS to the people. First of all, if you don't know what IFS is and you're not a terminology person, that's okay. I'm not either. I don't care about any of those terms. But here's how you can relate to it. Do you ever feel things like there's a part of me that feels like, well, you're right. There is a part of you that wants to. There is a part of you that feels right. So that's all you need to know when it comes to IFS. Now, here's my theory. I believe that we are all born pure, 100% pure, clean slate, nothing, boom, raw into the world, right? And that's where it ends. The first thing that happens, slap in the butt, the lights in the operating room, the nurses, the doctors. Then we get mom and dad, or the lack of mom and dad, right? Then we get siblings, then we get school, then we get religion, then we get all of these things that in a lot of our cases we get abused, whether it's sexual, psychological, physical, verbal, generational. There's a myriad of abuses that fall into the area of trauma. But let's put the word trauma aside for a little bit longer. We get all of these influences from birth to about 8 years old. In my version is 12, but clinically is 8. We get all of these powers, all of these things that are forming who we are in a place where we don't have choice. We're not able to choose anything. We're just being created by all of these things. That's why parts come into play, because parts have to come into place to allow us to survive, to protect us, right? Boom. Now we're adults, right? And now nothing makes sense, or most things don't make sense, or I feel uncomfortable, or I have everything I ever wanted in life, and yet I feel empty, or I can't break through in any area of my life. Whatever it is, what's happening is that all those old beliefs, all those parts that came into play in that birth to 8 years old are now running my life, and there is no self-led experience. There is no authentic self. Authentic self is me with all of my parts in harmony, right? So that's where this work begins.
Yeah,
that's what this work is about.
First of all, good explanation. Second of all, I agree with you. The studies show 8, 9 years old, like 0 to 8, 9 years old is when you're really forming your core beliefs, and they're kind of set by that 9-year-old time frame. But I say the same thing. I say, feels more like 12 to me.
Yeah, me too.
Right. And that's funny. So I always say, they say 0 to 8. I say 0, 10, 11, 12. I feel like you're still kind of observing. But to your point, we're born pure. I say the same thing. And when I'm trying to explain it to my clients, and again, most of them are women, not all, but many of them have children. I'll say, do you remember when your child was born? Do you remember that? And they were just like a mushy ball of love and light. And they had no judgment, no opinion. And they were just wide-eyed and observing. I said, you were that way too when you were born. And as you started to observe your environment, and you only needed a handful of things, keep me fed, clean, safe, secure. I need to know I belong.
Teach me.
But even if you're just observing, I need to know I matter here. So anything that feels like my need of mattering is not being met, that's going to feel like death, right? Because it's terrifying. So how do I need to shapeshift just a little bit to get that response? So I always say, when we're young, we shed authentic pieces of ourselves to meet the needs of others so they will meet our needs. And when it works, it's simple cause and effect. You're like, well, that works, so I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah.
And then by the time you're 30, 40, 50, you turn around and you've left a breadcrumb of self all over the place. Mm-hmm. And the goal is to go back and grab those pieces and reattach to yourself.
Yeah. And so what happens at that period in our lives too is that we're in survival mode, right? So we learn that survival mode equals how you live. And so now we're adults and we're still in survival mode. It doesn't serve us anymore. So I want to clarify, because I'm the responsibility coach, but sometimes the word responsibility has a negative connotation. So remember the story I just told you about my theory of that we're all born pure, no responsibility whatsoever. I'm not responsible for any of that. Remember how I told you what happens to me in adulthood when I start to see that all of these things are not really working for me? Full responsibility there. My responsibility is for my well-being, my recovery, the way that I live my life, the decisions that I make. Not responsible for that first thought that comes into my brain. I'm responsible for the action I take based on that thought. I don't know about you, but I used to believe that a thought or a feeling was a cue for me to take an action. And what I've learned is that a thought and a feeling is just a thought and a feeling. And then what I get to do is pause and then find out, what is the proper action here? Is it contrary action? Or is it to listen to it and follow through? And that's what I get in the recovery process. And that's what I get from learning how to take responsibility for my recovery and my well-being. So responsibility, it's not a bad word. And part of the work that we do together is I share with you the difference between old idea of responsibility, new idea of responsibility. And I create this bridge for you to cross. If you want to, you don't have to.
where do core beliefs come into play
Right.
in that work for you? Because I
Complete.
always, as coaches, we get exposed to a lot of models, and there's a model out there that's very popular and global and universal of like circumstance or event, and then your thought and your feeling and your actions and your outcome. But I always say to my clients, listen, if changing your thought and this whole concept of like change your thoughts, change your life worked, we would be doing it. We wouldn't be stuck. I said the missing layer between event and thought is your core belief.
Because we're transitioning into a great topic, because now we're talking about Madison Avenue. That's telling me like,
so let's talk about it.
But let me answer the thing about core belief. Core belief is nothing more than ideas and traditions that I picked up in order to survive. But I don't know that.
Right?
Before the age of 12, but I don't know that. I don't know that. It's like, let's take religion, for example. Nothing against religion. If you're a religious person and it works for you, power to you, okay? So this is not a criticism. This is an observation. When we are children and we are indoctrinated into a specific religion, we are not given a choice. But now we're in our 40s and 50s and we don't believe what we were meant to believe when we were children, but it's a core belief. And if I change it, I feel shame and guilt and I'm wrong because I was never given an opportunity to be authentic and be a free thinker and be self-led. So that's how core beliefs come into play. All traditions and ideas that were put on me, that I have no responsibility there, that I then take on with me. But now it's time to change my responsibility. Madison Avenue. Let's talk about
Madison Avenue. And
Madison Avenue.
We're gonna fuck Madison Avenue. And we were talking and like planning out what we wanted to talk about. We said Madison Avenue is the new pandemic.
100%.
Right? Because it's result mentality. People have lost sight of the progress and the process, and they're only focused on the end result. So why do we want to fuck Madison Avenue? What does it even mean, the Madison Avenue mentality to you?
So here's why Madison Avenue is detrimental, because Madison Avenue feeds and fits exactly into the beliefs that we took on early on, which is we don't have a voice, we don't have authenticity, we are here to be told what to do and be led. Right now we're adults with that same core belief and mentality that we haven't broken through. Madison Avenue shows up and he goes, take this pill, lose this weight, look this way, wear these shoes, put this haircut on, believe this, do this. No, don't listen to your thoughts, change your thoughts. They tell me all of this thing, and all this is greed. This is industry. This is money. This is capitalism. Nothing against capitalism. I live in the United States. I don't want to live anywhere else. God bless America. All of the above. However, I don't want to capitalize on hurting you. Right.
But as you're saying that, I have this visualization of like a movie being produced where like everybody's walking down the street, looking in the same direction, wearing the same general brands or types of clothes, like you said, similar haircuts. And the idea is we're not connected to self. We're not connected to what we want.
Right.
We're trying to fit the mold so we feel enough, so we feel seen, so we feel understood, but we're not really seen or understood. It's just a version of us. That's not the authentic piece.
Exactly. And like you were saying earlier about that client of yours, we don't know what we want.
I know.
We don't know what we want. How can we know what we want if we were never given an opportunity and a voice to express that?
But then don't you feel in that way at Madison Avenue? This is a theory, guys. Based on
I'm writing a book, which I'm going to name Madison Avenue. So, I mean, that's the level.
I live a half hour from New York City. Vincent lived in New York City for a very long time. So if you've never been to New York City, let's describe what Madison Avenue in New York City looks like.
Okay, so Madison Avenue is a walk down Rich Lane. It's all these posh, very, very, very expensive shops. Absolutely beautiful. Everybody you see for the most part walking around Madison Avenue, it's all these dressed up people. But the Madison Avenue we're addressing is that originally in the 60s, Madison Avenue is where all the ad agencies were. So we're talking about the power of ads, social media, and all of advertising, right? That especially in the industry of don't change your thoughts, change your feelings. Here's the deal, guys. God bless you, and write a book if you're able to change your thoughts and your feelings. I have written, I have read, I haven't written, but I have read 20 books on change my feelings and change my thoughts. None of them successful for me. None of them attainable. I don't have the power to change the first thought. It's just going to come. Why don't I have the power? Because it's ingrained in an old belief. So I have to wait until I change my actions so that my thoughts follow. So if I focus on change the thought, don't think that way, don't feel that way, I will let myself down over and over again. Yeah. Nobody is writing a book, or most people are not writing a book on like engage in process and change your actions. Process of changing actions equals a shift in thinking and feeling. Not the other way around.
Can you paint a picture or like give an example for the listener on what it looks like not to do it, and then what it would look like to do it the way that you're describing?
I'm going to give you a perfect example. So I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I'm sober 29 years, December 28th. I got sober December 28th, 1994, right? So I'm 29, coming up on my 30 years next, in 20. Anyways, long story. Here's what happens in alcoholism, right? And people getting sober. They start to get sober, and then they have these feelings and these thoughts that they have to drink. They succumb to the feeling and the thought, and they drink, right? The other scenario is people are getting sober, and they have these thoughts and feelings of drinking. But somebody is guiding them and said, you don't need to listen to those thoughts and feelings. You need to acknowledge them as being thoughts and feelings, and you need to take contrary action, which means you get to not drink, no matter how you think and feel. It's a little harsh, but here's what happens. I start to gain power in what I can do in life. I start to understand subliminally at first that I'm no longer a victim of my thoughts and my feelings. I also start to understand that I have the power of act in specific ways in my life so that I can start to take actions that no longer hurt me, but actually help me. Those two things happen. The further thing that happens is as I start to not drink, when I think and feel that I have to or else, the thinking and feeling of I have to drink start to dissipate, and eventually they go away completely. So that proves to me 29 years ago of the power of action in order to change thinking and feeling, not the other way around. I lived decades believing that in order for me to do something, I had to feel it or think it first, and that whatever I thought and feel was the truth. It's not the truth. It's real because I'm feeling it and I'm thinking it, but it's not the truth. Then what is the truth? The truth is what's in front of me. That's a whole other workshop, a whole other talk, a whole other part of the responsibility breakdown.
But it's funny. I have a sign in my office that said "Thoughts are not facts."
They're not.
Yeah, but they're
real. They're real because we feel them, and they're real. They're there. But what are they based on? What are they based on? What is the truth?
Well, I don't have it in front of me here. It's around here somewhere in my office, but I'm a big proponent of the book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. And I'm actually even a bigger proponent of the Fifth Agreement, which a lot of people have never read, which is phenomenal.
I haven't read that.
It's so good. And basically the Fifth Agreement is listen, but be skeptical. Right? Mm-hmm. So, but what I like about the Fifth Agreement is he goes over the other four agreements, but I like the stories and the analogies he uses for those other four agreements better in the Fifth Agreement. It's very interesting.
So I don't want to. The thing, talking about the four agreements, one of the things that changed my life about that book, it's vocabulary. Be impeccable with your words. And, I pass that on to my clients. In fact, I am the coach that calls you when you call yourself stupid or idiot or an asshole. Well, that's what I always do. I'm going to be calling you that every time that I work with you. And whenever I work, I even do it with friends because it's what I would say, how I speak to myself and about myself. I start to believe I'm not even knowing that I'm doing that, but I am doing it. So being impeccable with your words is huge. It changed my life.
Well, it's interesting. I was working with somebody the other day and I caught her in 5 minutes. She said 5 different times, my anxiety this, my anxiety that. And when I let her finish talking, I said, okay, if we're going to work together, you need to understand something about me. It's all about the language. Do you want to be anxious? Do you want the anxiety? She goes, absolutely not. That's why I'm working with you. I'm like, well, then why are you taking ownership of it?
That's it. It's not your anxiety, it's the anxiety I'm feeling.
I said, what would it look like if you just said the anxiety? And like 5 minutes later, she goes, and then she stops. She goes, the anxious feeling. I said, okay. So like, because I said to her, I have a little brain that I bring down off my shelf that I use all the time. And I said, you see this part of your brain? It's the absorber. There's no part of your brain that when you say my anxiety, or I'm dealing with my anxiety, that your brain goes, oh, but you really don't have anxiety. Anxiety is just like this sensation that happens in your vagus nerve and blah, blah, blah. No, whatever you tell it, it's truth.
Completely.
So if you don't want it, stop telling yourself that you own it.
Yeah.
And I say that with everything. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in October 2020. And when we talk about parts, there was a part of me that was like, thank God somebody can acknowledge the level of physical pain I'm feeling, which I have a whole theory on this. And that somebody's acknowledging that I have this extreme fatigue. And then the other part of me called bullshit. The other part of me quickly picked up my phone as soon as I got into the car and looked up ACEs and rheumatoid arthritis and said, well, if I'm an ACEs score of 5 out of 10, if I've checked off 5 out of the 10 boxes pretty consistently over the years, and I can see that the CDC studies have shown that people who with scores of 5 or, really 4 or more have more than an 80% chance of being diagnosed with something super inflammatory, that makes a lot of fucking sense to me. But I don't know. I can see it's registering on the test as rheumatoid arthritis. Check, 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 check. This comes to the labels on the DSM-5 later down the road, right? But from a physical standpoint, yeah, I was labeled this. But at the same time, I was like, I don't want it. And I kind of call bullshit on it. I just think that these adverse experiences I had are still in the fiber of my being. As much as I thought I had resolved it, there were parts still lingering physically in my bones, literally. And so I just did the work to try to find a way to further release that. That's the responsibility, right? They offered me steroids. And they said, here, why don't you take these steroids? And I said, I want to try something else first. And I'll come back to you. I want to retest my blood work in like 6 months. Give me 6 months. I have a couple of others. If the pain and the exhaustion is off the charts and I can't handle it, I'll come back. But I have other things I want to try first. And I did. And it worked for me.
Well, see, go ahead.
But I never, anytime somebody said, oh, how's your rheumatoid arthritis? And I'll say, well, I'll never refer to it as mine. I just say that I was diagnosed with, because I checked enough boxes for, and that's it. And I believe I've put it into remission, and that's what I always will tell them.
This is an example of almost like the anti-medicine avenue experience, right? But you're talking about you and I, two people that are, so like we're trained in this, we've taken the journey, we continue to be in the journey, we're self-led, and we know that it's up to us to research. I have a similar experience with my cholesterol, right? So my cholesterol goes up to the 200 and the highest it's been is 210. I have some doctors have always been like, you got to get on medication. My doctor and I have a relationship where it's like, okay, so you're up again. I'm going to give you 3 months. So then I know that I have 3 months to do to change the way I eat. I hate the word diet, but I don't because I don't use it. I change the way I eat. I eat a balanced diet, I balance meals, and I start to exercise, and my numbers go down. Now, I believe that we are the lower end of that spectrum. I believe that the majority of us based on Madison Avenue are like, oh my God, my cholesterol high. Here's a pill. Let me take the pill. This result-oriented mentality will kill us.
And
Will
it's
kill us,
also,
will kill us, will kill us.
we,
Process is the key. Process.
so we want the acknowledgement, right? Like there was a part of me that was happy that somebody could acknowledge I was in this much pain, which
Necessary.
Side note, I believe, just based on my own work, that finally somebody understood my pain, because when I was trying to explain my emotional pain from the ages of 11 to 21, no one was listening. It's just a theory, okay?
Thank you.
But I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on my own body. So I felt like finally seen and understood on the level of pain. It felt like, oh my God, finally somebody gets it. But I think that was emotional pain that had just turned physical to finally be understood.
You just reminded me of something. Go ahead.
So, the idea of this Madison Avenue, it's like, okay, well, part of it's like, yes, you do see me, you do understand me, that feels good. But on the other side, it's like, now just give me the result, give me the pill, give me the way to fix it. But the lesson is in the journey of working with it and trying to find a way of understanding of how or why is this in my space, right? What is the gift in this challenge? What is the purpose in this pain? So we're not really indoctrinated or programmed or raised to question authority or to get curious. We're just like, oh, you're telling me I have cancer? Oh, you're telling me I have high cholesterol? Oh, you're telling me I have rheumatoid arthritis? Oh, you're telling me I have anxiety? You're telling me I have bipolar disorder? You're telling me I have ADHD? Okay, well, I don't have to do anything. I'm not saying everybody has this approach, but it's like, you know better. You're the expert.
Correct.
And so I'm just going to follow. This is that, like when I was saying earlier, the Madison Avenue, but it's also that madman mentality of like, we're going to tell you from an advertising perspective what it is you're supposed to think, feel, and hear.
Exactly. We're going to tell you. We're going to tell you, just like our childhood. We're going to tell you. Both Stacy and I come from the same association, International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching. One of the most profound takeaways from that association is that we don't treat diagnosis, we treat the individual. We speak to the individual. Well, this is a game changer in life. Listen, cholesterol exists, cancer exists, rheumatoid arthritis exists, anxiety exists. All of these ailments exist. It's a great thing to be diagnosed with these things if we do have them. However, the danger is in getting the diagnosis and go for the result, which is a pill, right? We want to surround ourselves with people who have the expertise to diagnose us, who are encouraging, inviting us, and motivating us to engage in the process of finding out the options and the way through this, and leaving that end result as an end result, as a last resort. I can't start in the result. I have to start in the process. I have to eliminate the options, because I may find along the way that I didn't need the pill. Now, some people need the pill. Some people need the pill. I'm a pro pill guy. But get there. Don't start there.
So you're making me think of, I have a very good friend. I've talked to you about him before. And he was diagnosed with cancer maybe 7 years ago. Okay. And he found it because he went in for gallbladder surgery, and they're like, and by the way, we have a problem, right? You have this pervasive cancer. It's not treatable. It's not really curable. We'll try something, but like, it's not a good diagnosis. And so he's doing all the things that they're asking him to do. He's taking the chemo pills. He's doing the this. He's doing the that. It's not really working. And it's also creating for him a tremendous amount of anxiety every time he has to go in and get a scan or do whatever. So he's on the phone with his aunt, and he's saying, every single time I have to go in for this scan, it just causes me so much anxiety. And she goes, then why are you going for the scan? And then he goes, because they told me to.
Exactly.
She's like, but you have choice. And he was like, I do. And this was on his own his whole self-development journey had started well before this on a different level, but this was like a whole new realm for him. I can tell them no. She's like, you can tell them whatever you want. So he went back to his doctor and said, I'm not going to come back every 6 months. I'll come back when I feel in my system I need to be checked out. In the meantime, he started following Joe Dispenza. He started following people that felt more in alignment with who he was. And he took, to your point, deep responsibility for his own physical healing.
Correct.
Learning meditation, learning this, learning that, really becoming very attuned to and in tune with his body. He goes back for a scan. The doctor goes, what the fuck have you been doing? I can't find the cancer.
Right. Yeah. And so this is a very powerful.
Right. I can't find it.
Right.
He took responsibility. He stopped doing the Madison Avenue thing. He's going to Sloan Kettering.
Right.
They're the best. They know. They're telling me. I'm following. It's not working. Let me take a curve and take some responsibility and a risk and try something else. Works for him.
So I want to make sure that our listeners and our viewers know that we are not saying in any way, don't follow traditional medicine. Not at all. I'm not saying that for a minute. Follow traditional medicine. Traditional medicine works. But what I am saying, and I think what we're both saying, but definitely I'm not going to speak for you. I'm definitely speaking for myself when I say, without the emotional and psychological treatment of whatever comes up when you have a diagnosis of a bodily injury or an ailment, the level of recovery won't be as great, because it's all connected. I have to deal with the anxiety, the fear, the shame, the guilt, the uncertainty. All of those things need to be treated in order for me to be in a state of being of calmness, so that whatever treatment I'm receiving works.
That's
because
right.
It's not blocked by the emotions and the feelings, right? I have to unblock my psyche. I have to unblock myself in order for things to work. That's the work that we do. The unblocking of that stuff, that's what we do. I don't know how to treat cancer or high cholesterol or anything like that. I don't know how to do that. I know how to treat self.
But I think it's also about allowing the person voice and choice in their own.
Exactly.
Whatever. And it's about saying it's okay to question. It's okay to get curious.
It's necessary.
Okay, right? And to your point, it's like, if you have a feeling when you are in any kind of conversation with a presumed expert in their field, it's okay to say, that doesn't feel right to me.
Right.
And this is what I'm feeling in this scenario. And let's face it, you're going to be with let's just use medical for an example, but it can go across all fields. And I agree with you. No one's saying don't get help. I'm just saying there's another layer to the process, right?
Exactly.
It's okay to say, yes, no, I don't agree. I do agree. Right. You're going to come across people that are going to try to jam down your throat that they are the authority and how dare you question.
Right.
But that's, again, part of the process. It's like, if you're more closely led to self, it's that confidence, it's that curiosity, it's that connectedness and that courage to say, that, this is my body and that actually doesn't resonate with me. There's a part of me that actually thinks maybe I should take a little bit more of this part of the journey or that part of the journey. And we're going back to the 4 agreements. We're really domesticated and indoctrinated to just accept the agreement. If I'm telling you it's so, it's so.
That's right. Because we took it on early on. It's all we knew. Part of that first birth to 12 years old. If you say it, it is. Not only that, we are in the habit of asking you, how do I feel? How am I doing? What do I do? Because I only can get validation of me from you. So when it comes to a diagnosis, it's like, oh, is that what I have? What do I do? What do I take? Right? As opposed to like, let me sit with this and let me think about this. Let me go deep into this. Let me speak to, in IFS, let me speak to my parts. Let me see what's happening. Let me see what's coming up here for me. Right? What's coming up here for me? What is this fearful part that's coming in and saying, take the pill, take the pill, take the pill, take the pill? Well, let's have a conversation with that part. I know this is like advanced shit for people that are just starting in this process. Just trust me. It's about listening to that part of you that says, take the pill, and then just question it.
Yeah.
Why? It's that simple, really.
Well, you're allowed to question, and I think that's a big part of how we
correct.
Don't
correct.
question, right? So, can I share a story with you? Because
yes.
I know it'll resonate
I love your stories.
So, I am through the same association that you and I both got trained through to become trauma recovery coaches. I'm in a new certification track with them. That's all about internal family systems, parts work, polyvagal theory, the whole thing, which is incredible. So I decide that I would like to get much more in tune and attuned to my own parts. I think that I developed some very big, shadowy parts that have been protecting and or covering up a lot of micro parts that I don't really have good access to. So I decided to hire my own IFS therapist. Right? So I went out, I did some research, I found this dude, I love him. We're going to be a great match. So I go to my first session a couple of weeks ago, and he knows what I do for work. I know his insurance does not take I know he does not take my insurance, and I've already figured out how I'm going to do this and submit it to insurance and the whole jazz. So at the end of our first session, he says to me, I know I don't take your insurance, but I'm going to create a super bill for you so you can submit it to your insurance company. And with that, and he paused and he goes, forgive me. And I know this is going to be a conversation. He goes, I need to put a diagnosis on the super bill. So I start chuckling. And he goes, so what do you want it to be? He goes, and I said, well, what I'd like it to be is developmental trauma disorder. But we can't do that because they didn't let that into the book. I said, and the other appropriate diagnosis would be complex PTSD, but we can't do that because they didn't let that into the book. So that really brings us to, and he filled in the blank. He goes, anxiety or PTSD. Mm-hmm. And I said, put down the PTSD, because that's really, of what's available in the book, the most tightly aligned to what I'm still challenged with at 52 years old, right? But it's, in my opinion, complex because it really happened well before I was 18 years old on a very consistent, very chronic, very prolonged basis. Mm-hmm. As I'm driving home, I thought to myself, holy fuck. Mm-hmm. If I didn't know what I know, and if I was results oriented, and somebody gave me the diagnosis of PTSD, I'd be like, holy shit, I'm so fucked up that they've diagnosed me with PTSD. This situation was so bad growing up. Right. That I now have PTSD. If I absorb that label as truth,
correct,
it would completely change the lens through which I saw myself. 100%. I'd think I'm walking around. It would almost be like carrying a ball and chain of PTSD. Correct. I now have to attach myself to this label, which you and I had a whole conversation about.
That's coming up next.
Because holy shit, that can really fuck somebody up. Because when I started therapy at 15, and was really deep in it in my 20s, they were giving me this diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. That made a lot of sense to me because I came from a long line of people who were severely disabled by anxiety. And I just accepted the truth, the agreement, that this is biochemical only, I'm not saying it's not, but only available to me by way of biochemical genetics, predisposition. And it made sense. This person suffers from it. Their parent suffers from it. My great-grandparents suffered from it. Guess I'm just going to suffer from it too. And I'm just going to accept my fate. Give me the pill right here, right? So I started at 15. By 35, I was so overwhelmed with anxiety and having week-long panic attacks. I was like, give me the pill. I cannot feel like this one more fucking day. I had been going to therapy for 20 years. And that was going to be my best option because nobody was opening up the door and helping me get curious that there could be another reason why I'm walking with panic and anxiety based on my experiences from ages 11 to 21.
Right. So
Not
I want to say something in the Madison Avenue episode. I want to wrap it up because the experience you just had with the your therapist or your coach, needing to have a diagnosis for you to be able to get covered by insurance is nothing more than another version of Madison Avenue. Give me a label because a label makes me money. I got to put you in a box because that box allows me to make money, get paid, fill in the blank, right? So this is how pervasive and dangerous this Madison Avenue idea of telling me what to do, diagnosing me, putting me in a box is. It goes all the way from like selling me perfume to diagnosing me whether or not I am that. And so what is the takeaway? What is the takeaway about this Madison Avenue concept? The takeaway is allow yourself to make a decision if you want to buy it or if you want to question it. My suggestion is that you question everything. Question everything. Build that curiosity muscle. Build that curiosity muscle. It will save your life. It saved mine, saving Stacy. It's all of that. So
100%. So guys, if you like this episode, if you like this energy, you're going to want to watch the whole series and listen to the whole series between myself and Vincent. As I wrap this one up, you guys should know we're going to have a couple of these going on. I know the next one we're going to talk about is going to be called Fuck the Label. And we're going to go right down the rabbit hole of what I just opened up the door for. If you like this, you want to definitely subscribe to the podcast so you can be alerted when all of the episodes are launched. All of the links to Vincent and myself will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned for more.